الطاهرين
اللهم صل على
لا سيما بقية الله الحجة بن الحسن فداها أرواح العالمين واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أبد الآبدين ودهر الداهرين. اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: أحل لكم صيد البحر وطعامه متاعا لكم وللسيارة وحرم عليكم صيد البر ما دمتم حرما واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. So, as Samahat said, Mohammad Kadhim mentioned that we will, inshallah, discuss how a faqih can extract information using verses, narrations, and probably some other evidence, especially in this specific topic when we come to talk about actually whether all type of sea creatures are halal or not. Only one or two type actually of them are edible in accordance to Islamic jurisprudence, or actually Shia jurisprudence, because other sects it's much easier for them to actually eat crabs and probably they might even invite their friends and family and do a barbecue for that, and
crocodile barbecue.
Yeah, crocodile barbecue and so on. But in accordance to fatwa, and when I say fatwa, it's what, after all, a scholar will say by taking his followers and Shia to the safe side, to be able on the Day of Judgment to say that I've done my best, I did not actually lure my followers. So that's why sometimes when they go to evidence, they might see traces, and some actually prove that this thing might be halal, not haram. But when they focus on that, and when they want to say something to actually say the fatwa, they might not accept their followers to actually do that specific thing. For instance, eat an unscaled fish. So why? Because probably they see that fish, it's not that vital in our lives. I mean, as long as you can eat scaled fish, you don't have to eat octopus. I mean, it's not that vital in our lives or in our diets. So probably we can avoid eating that, even if we have some proof saying that it's halal to do so. So let's start with those proof some scholars brought. It's Mohammad Kadhim bringing them to you, which some scholars believe that eating anything from sea should be halal, and they brought some evidence for that from verses and narrations.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So before we get into the evidence, because the evidence, as you know, some of you might be familiar with, the evidence that a scholar looks into when he wants to issue a fatwa, a verdict regarding a specific issue, is he'll go to the four main sources. And the four main sources, as a lot of you should now be familiar with, are the Quran, the Sunnah, which are the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, as well as the intellect and ijma', consensus among scholars. And so the evidence that we have at this moment is, or can be, it can be said that we have evidence from the Quran, the traditions, and maybe consensus. We'll get to that a little bit later on, inshallah. Now, the Sayyid, given his immense knowledge in all areas when you compare him to me, but specifically in the Quran, he will take the side of the Quran. He'll mention the verses. But before that, I'd like to first give you a very short summary of what scholars say about eating fish that doesn't have scales. So, within the Sunni sect, most of them have said that all sea creatures are halal. If I'm not mistaken, Abu Hanifa has said that all fish are halal, even the ones that don't have scales, but he has excluded all other creatures like clams and God knows whatever they eat. But when you look at Shia scholars, most of them, and when I say most of them, I mean a lot of them, have said that it is haram to consume sea creatures that don't have scales. However, there were a few, both back in the day and more recently, that have debated the issue. With regards to old scholars, it's been said that Shaykh al-Saduq, he believes that you can eat fish without scales. Now, it's hard to use this as evidence because Shaykh al-Saduq doesn't have a book where he has summarized all of his verdicts. What he does have is a compilation of hadith that he says, I use these hadith to make, deduce the rulings. And in that book, he has narrated the hadith that can be used as evidence to claim that you can eat all types of fish, both the ones that have scales and the ones that don't have scales. However, using this as evidence is not too good. And there were other scholars throughout history who have debated this. Some of them may have even been drawn to making the verdict that you can consume fish without scales. But now that we're going to look at the evidence, we'll start with Samahat al-Sayyid.
So, two verses actually, they bring, and of course we are having a joint class because Sayyid Mohammad Kadhim is responsible for the jurisprudence class and I'm responsible for the exegesis class. And as you know, we are actually explaining how we can understand and interpret jurisprudence verses. So two verses we have now that scholars mentioned, some scholars mentioned, that might be able to be held as verses that give you the permission to eat any type of sea creatures, whether it's fish or scaled fish, non-scaled fish, or any other creature in the sea. For instance, the verse when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِيمَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ. Do you know where that verse is? Just let me see. Yeah. Yeah, it's in chapter 8, I believe, Surah Al-An'am, verse number 145. قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِيمَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا أَوْ لَحْمَ خِنْزِيرٍ فَإِنَّهُ رِجْسٌ أَوْ فِسْقًا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And I believe that I've mentioned this verse before when we were discussing some other topics. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states by telling his prophet, say, O our prophet, I do not find in what have been revealed to me that anyone should be forbidden to eat anything except, okay, how do you pronounce that? Carrion?
Carrion.
Yeah, carrion or spilled blood or flesh of swines.
Carrion is just a dead animal.
Yeah, dead animal. Of course, dead human beings as well.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Please stay away and avoid all types of
Cannibalism.
cannibalism. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so this verse by itself, it says that, our prophets say that, I don't see in any revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling me that you're not allowed to eat the various type of food that some people used to say it's haram for them to eat. As you know, Jewish are very strict, much more strict than Muslims, and probably this type of verses are aiming them. So the Prophet was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say that I can't see anything revealed to me which is haram, but a dead animal.
I think what the Jews say is that you have to avoid animals that have split hooves. So the animals that are haram for them, that is halal for us, is camel.
Yeah.
They believe that it's halal.
Not only that, even for the meat, so they don't eat
fat.
the animal fat. They don't eat the animal fat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that in the Holy Quran. So this verse is saying that, so a dead animal we're not allowed to eat, of course, blood or swine, flesh of swine, of course. It's not that delicious apparently, and if someone just kill a halal animal, but not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for an idol, it will be haram as well. So we're not going to discuss all of the muharramat, but we are talking about animals. So this verse says, I can't find anything haram but swine, but a dead meat, but a blood. Okay, so by itself we cannot rely on this verse, because what about other animals? But when we go to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, which the narrations that Muhammad Kadhim should read, I believe, when they say, actually, they rely on this verse to prove that, eating non-scale fish is halal. Okay, so this cannot be taqiyya. You know taqiyya? When Imam Salamullahi alayhi says something because he wants to protect his followers. For instance, if you go to Masjid al-Haram or Masjid al-Nabi, as you know, when you visit those places, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to favor all of us to go and visit the holy shrine of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his household, and Mecca as well. Sometimes they come to you and they tell you, police, sometimes they put police just to force people to pray Jama'at. Of course, when they force you to pray, you have to pray like them. You cannot pray on turba, or you cannot pray while reciting Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim loudly, and etc. You have to pray like them. You cannot say that, okay, I'm a traveler, I don't have to pray 4 rak'ah, I can pray 2 rak'ah. No, you have to pray with them.
And if you insist, they probably put you in the slammer.
Yeah, that's the problem. So this verse or this narration actually cannot be a taqiyya. Why? Because when they say Ahlul Bayt when they want to protect their followers, they don't have to interpret verse by to do so. So when we say that, they rely on a verse, okay, such a verse, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ, okay, to prove that this type of fish is halal. It means that this narration cannot be taqiyya. Why? Because otherwise they are doing something very wrong. They're interpreting the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
in a way that
but
shouldn't be.
in a way, or and actually put a meaning for that verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want that meaning to be understood from this verse. So you can read this narration and explain it.
Inshallah. So we'll start with a number of ahadith that may be used as evidence to claim that all types of sea creatures, or more specifically fish without scales, can be considered halal. And then we'll look at conflicting ahadith to see which group of ahadith we can take as evidence. So we'll start with this hadith.
So the class today is gonna be a longer class, as you know. So probably
because we're combining two, so
yeah.
it'll be a little bit
So
longer.
just bear with us.
So the first one is a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, in which he says, لا يكره شيء من الحيتان إلا الجري. The Imam says, none of sea creatures is makruh. Now, yukrah here could encompass both meanings, both haram or makruh. In other words, the Imam is saying that there's nothing wrong with any fish other than, or maybe haytan here could also include all sea creatures, right?
Well,
Or is it
usually
specific?
No, so the fish they call it.
Okay.
And
So
it's in the Quran as well.
Musa.
Yeah, correct. Musa and Khadr.
So the
Of course, they didn't. They wasn't in a position to hunt a whale back then, so it was a normal fish, but they call it hut. I don't know. Probably it's the bigger one. I don't know. I'm not sure.
So the Imam says, لا يكره شيء من الحيتان إلا الجري. None of the fish are makruh except for the jarri. Now, this hadith entails that you say that all fish are halal except for jarri, even though the Imam was in a position to give the ruling of Islam. He chose to not mention the issue of scales. The only thing that the Imam says is that all fish are okay except for the jarri. Now we'll talk about what jarri is something similar to an eel, if I'm not mistaken. In another hadith, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, لا يكره شيء من الحيتان إلا الجريث, which is just another version. Maybe it was a difference in dialects. In some places they call it jarri, in other places they call it jarith. Again, so the Imam is saying that all fish are okay except for this eel-like fish. In another hadith, now this is the hadith that the Sayyid will focus on, because the first two ahadith that we mentioned, someone could come up and say, you know what, these two ahadith are, since there are two conflicting groups of ahadith, then we'll look at how or which group we should use as evidence and proof. And since the Sunnis believe that all types of fish are halal, then the ahadith have taught us that when there are two conflicting groups of ahadith, then take the one that doesn't go along with the beliefs of the Sunnah. And the reason for this is because the Imams were under a lot of pressure and they had to issue the verdicts that the government believed in. And so they couldn't give their followers the actual rulings. And so when there are two conflicting groups of hadith, one is the one that the Sunnis also believe in, then most likely it's the one that is issued in taqiyyah. And so with regards to these two ahadith, the Imam is just giving a verdict. He's saying all are okay except for jarith. In the second hadith, the Imam is using the Quran. And the Quran, as the Sayyid just explained, it's not right for the Imam to deduce a ruling from a verse in the Quran that does not go along with the actual verdict of the Quran. And so Zurara comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and he says, I asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about the jarith again.
Which is eel.
Eel.
Yeah, because...
So the jarith is an eel.
Probably.
And so the Imam alayhi salam says, وَمَا الْجَرِيث? The Imam says, what is this animal? Again, as I said, because there are different names. And so Zurara, he said, then I explained what this fish is. And the Imam uses this verse that the Sayyid mentioned. قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ. And then he said, لم يحرم الله شيئا من الحيوان في القرآن إلا الخنزير بعينه. The Imam then says, yes, the eel is jarith, for those who are asking. The Imam then says that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not made haram any animal except for the pig, إلا الخنزير, swine. ويكره كل شيء من البحر ليس له قشر. And anything of the sea, all creatures of the sea, that do not have scales are in fact makruh. وَلَيْسَ بِحَرَامٍ. Then the Imam says, make sure that you get me right. It is not haram. It's only makruh. وَلَيْسَ بِحَرَامٍ وَإِنَّمَا هُوَ مَكْرُوهٌ. So this is the hadith where the Imam uses this verse to give the verdict.
Yeah, especially this riwayah was narrated by Zurara, and as you know, Zurara is very esteemed and very high, and his status, fiqh-wise, I'm talking about. So when Imam alayhi salam talks to him, he brings to him the best of the best. So he's not doing taqiyya with Zurara, of course. He's teaching him, and that's why he brings verses from Quran, and that's why he actually focuses on that. When he says makruh, okay? When he says makruh to someone, he might understand something else, but Imam states makruh, and I mean it's not haram, okay? Because he's very accurate. I'm talking about Zurara, and that's why Imam salamullahi alayhi wants him to understand. Yeah, he's teaching him. Imam alayhi salam wants him to understand. He doesn't want him to eat jarith or eel. No. He wanted him to be taught. He wanted to teach Zurara, and that's the thing. So when we say that, probably when Imam alayhi salam rely on this verse to prove actually to Zurara that eating a non-scaled fish is halal, it doesn't necessarily mean that Imam is telling Zurara that go and eat it. No, you're not gonna do it, because we have other narrations indicating that do not do it. It's not good to do it, or it's haram to do it, for instance, let's say. So it's very makruh. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam didn't want their followers to eat, for instance, jarith. But let's assume that if you just got stuck in an island, for instance, if you go for fishing, I'm not sure where do you leave. Sometimes you go for a holiday to an island, and just you got stuck there, and if you believe, or if you're a scholar, the one who you follow, believe that it's halal, but it's makruh for you to eat, but you see that you need to consume some sort of meats because there is no halal meat. For instance, you stay there for a year, so you get lost in an island for a year.
There's nothing except for oysters.
Okay, so you might use these type of narrations, or if a scholar give you the permission to do, you might use them to have some actually non-scale fish. So
that's a good point, I think, Sayyidina, that you mentioned, and that not everything that is halal is supposed to be acted upon. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that we don't have anything to prove that laughing gas, for example, is haram, or that some sort of psychoactive drug is haram. Let's assume, and I don't want to say or claim that drugs are halal, but let's assume that we find a drug that isn't haram. does that mean that we should go out and about using that drug? Should we just grab, a can of laughing gas and just walk around with a mask on and just spray it into our lungs? And this is important to understand that not everything is supposed to be acted upon. There are things that are made halal, and I think an obvious example that you would all know and understand is divorce. Divorce is halal, but does that mean that you should all divorce? No. Everything has a time and a place. And with regards to these things, making it halal doesn't mean that everyone should, as Brother Hussein Hadi mentions, should go to should hold eel barbecues. Far from it. We're looking at the evidences here because we don't want to claim, God forbid, that something that is in fact halal, we don't want to claim that it's haram. But we want to say that, or the Sayyid here is saying, that not everything that is halal should be acted upon.
Especially if it's makruh, especially when Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam wanted their followers to stay away from such things, okay? For instance, let me just...
Is that it?
Yeah, this one.
Okay. Another hadith, this one by Muhammad ibn Muslim, he says, I asked Imam Sadiq alayhi salam about...
No, this is what a proof to prove actually that it's haram to...
No, this one's it. Muhammad ibn Muslim says, I asked Imam Sadiq about the same animal, the jarri wal marmahi. Apparently, these two are from the same group, jarri and marmahi. Either they're the same animal or these are two different names for a single animal. Anyway, then he mentions a few names which God knows I have no idea what these mean. Al-jarri wal-marmahi was-zimmir. And then...
The name's not that nice to eat.
Yeah, obviously.
Zimmir.
When you look at the name, you feel full. And then Muhammad ibn Muslim is smart. And so he says that I asked him about these specific types of fish. And then I asked him about fish that do not have scales. وَمَا لَيْسَ لَهُ قِشْرٌ مِنَ السَّمَكِ أَحَرَامٌ هُوَ? I asked Imam Sadiq, is it haram? And so, again, as the Sayyid mentioned, since Muhammad ibn Muslim was one of the most scholarly students of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the Imam again gives him the skill set to deduce the rulings. He says, Ya Muhammad, اقرأ هذه الآية التي في الأنعام. Read this verse that is revealed in Surah Al-An'am. قل لا أجد فيما أوحي إلي محرما. And then Muhammad ibn Muslim says, then I read the verse for the Imam. I recited the verse for him. فقال إنما الحرام ما حرم الله ورسوله في كتابه. The Imam says, all the things that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have made haram in the Quran, that is haram. Nothing else. ولكنهم كانوا يعافون أشياء فنحن نعافها.
They used to leave it. They used to abandon it. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and Rasulullah used to abandon, not eat, avoid eating, although it's halal, but they used to avoid it, and that's why we follow the footstep of the Prophet. So it's not about whether it's halal or haram, but we will follow the footstep of the Prophet even if it's halal. This is what this narration actually is saying. And now we're going to go to the second evidence. Some scholars might claim that we can extract the haliyya and understand that it is halal for us to eat anything from sea, any type of creature. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the verse that I just recited when we started the class, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la taqtulu as-sayd wa antum hurum. Yeah, sorry, that's this verse actually. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أحل لكم صيد البحر وطعامه متاعا لكم. You are permitted the game of the sea and its food. So أحل لكم صيد البحر. أحسنت. وطعامه متاعا لكم وللسيارة وحرم عليكم صيد البر ما دمتم حرما واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون. Again, this verse is vague for us. Some scholars actually, when I say some, not too many of them. So literally not too many of them. When they come to this verse, they say, okay, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the holy book of Quran, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ, it's halal for you.
The games of sea are halal for you.
Yeah.
In an absolute manner.
Yeah, so it means that you can actually take any type of fish, any type of creature of the sea and eat it. But actually, when we go to previous verses,
including sea cucumbers.
Maybe. I'm not sure if there is anything like that.
Yeah, there is. It's disgusting.
Okay. So, but when we go to previous verses, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about what is permissible for a pilgrim man when he just put himself in a state of ihram, sanctity, they call it.
Ihram?
Yeah. Pilgrim sanctity. لا تقتلوا الصيد وأنتم حرم. So do not kill any game when you are in pilgrim sanctity.
I think that's the literal meaning.
Yeah.
But it just means when you're wearing the ihram.
Wearing the
because
ihram.
As you know, when you're wearing the ihram, there are things that you have to avoid. And one of those things that you have to avoid during the time that you are wearing the ihram is to hunt animals.
To hunt wild animals. And that's why you can actually, and you have actually, when you go to Hajj, to kill a sheep or a goat when you want to go out of the ihram. Of course, you when you do that, you're still in your ihram. You're in ihram status.
It doesn't invalidate the ihram.
Yeah, it doesn't invalidate the ihram. But these verses and narrations are talking about wild animals, so you can't, while you are in ihram, you cannot actually hunt anything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trialed the Prophet's companions with that when he states, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَيَبْلُوَنَّكُمُ اللَّهُ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الصَّيْدِ تَنَالُهُ أَيْدِيكُمْ. Ghazals and deers used to come next to tents, you know. In our countries, Middle East, you cannot see a pigeon just sitting next to you or eating, for instance, just sitting next to you.
That's because the Arabs would eat anything that
not because of that. Because usually kids wants to go and just catch it. But in Western countries, you see the flies, it come. Why? Because they feel safe. They saw that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trialed them. They saw that these Arabs, the companion of the Prophet, are banned from hunting them. So they used to come next to their tents. And sometimes, they felt secure. They sometimes used to enter the tents, but they were banned from killing them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that for a cause. Because after that, what happened? Rasulullah entered Mecca with his soldiers. And Rasulullah ordered all of his companions to not kill animal, to avoid killing any of mushrikeen.
So it's sort of a practice.
Exactly.
To avoid killing anything and anyone.
Yeah. So and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, لَيَبْلُوَنَّكُمُ اللَّهُ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الصَّيْدِ تَنَالُهُ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَرِمَاحُكُمْ. Although it was very close for you and you were able to hunt them down, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala banned you from that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that you are not allowed to hunt while you are in ihram, wearing ihram. Okay. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ. This is an exemption. What about catching fishes? Of course. You say fish, you don't say fishes.
Yeah.
Only Aussies say fishes. Okay. Okay. When you want to catch fishes, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, even if you wear ihram, you are allowed. Of course, fish are not tamed animals, so they are considered wild animal. But even though if you are in ihram status, you are allowed to catch fish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ. It doesn't mean that you are allowed to catch any type of fish and eat them, any type of sea creatures. even if it's octopus or any other thing. No. In a state of ihram, you're allowed to catch fish, of course. He's not talking about which type of fish you're allowed actually to catch and eat, and which type you are not. So, this verse cannot be relied upon to extract the haliyah, that you are allowed to eat even non-scaled fish.
So
No.
so the verse isn't even talking about
Exactly.
what type of fish.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not like the previous verse that we mentioned that Imam alayhi salam relied upon to extract that the haliyah when he says that قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا. No, this verse cannot be relied upon to understand actually that we are allowed to eat and consume any type of sea creatures. And that's why, so all of those verses, narrations I brought, it talks about actually how if you catch an animal, if you hunt an animal, a wild animal, you have to compensate. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقتلوا الصيد وأنتم حرم ومن قتله منكم متعمدا فجزاؤه مثل ما قتل من النعم. So if you catch a deer, it's a big one, so you have to compensate for that deer.
Just catching or hunting?
Hunt. If you hunt a deer, for instance, you have to compensate with a camel. It's different from ghazal. If you catch a ghazal, probably you have to compensate with cow. So it's different. And then, if you cannot pay for that, okay,
Then you fast?
then you have to fast. How? It depends on what you hunted. Yeah. So it's a big animal, you have to give 60 people to feed 60 people. But it's a smaller animal, for instance, it's gazelle. You can compensate by, and I'm talking about fasting. So you have to fast 60 days. Okay, if you hunt something big.
So the number of days are appropriate to the size of the animal.
Exactly. That's what narrations indicates. Just focus on that. Although it's not very related to our topic, but it's important to understand and digest and comprehend the verse. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقتلوا الصيد وأنتم حرم. Do not kill wild animal while you are wearing ihram. ومن قتله منكم متعمدا فجزاؤه مثل ما قتل من النعم. You have to compensate, okay, in a way that if you kill something big, you have to compensate something big for that big animal. يحكم به ذوى عدل منكم. Who should rule for that? Say this equals to this. ذوى عدل منكم. Two just people. Who are they? Narrations indicate that they are Rasulullah and Imam. So it's not normal people. So you have to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered all Muslims to go to the Prophet Dawa Adlin Minkum, Prophet and his successors, to see what they say. Okay, how should we compensate?
Not just any random Joe who's walking.
Yeah, exactly. جزاء فجزاء مثل ما قتل من نعم يحكم ذا به ذوى عدل منكم هديا بالغ الكعبة. Of course, if you kill that while you are wearing ihram, you have to take it to Kaaba. أو كفارة طعام مسكين أو عدل ذلك صياما. So, for instance, if you kill a ghazal, you have to give this ghazal, for instance, for 30 people to feed them, to let them feed themselves with that, 30 people. So you have to fast for 30 days. But if you kill a camel, you have to give for 60 people. So you have to fast for 60 days. أو كفارة طعام مسكين أو عدل ذلك صياما. Or it's equivalent in fasting. Equivalent. So it should be in accordance to the size of that wild animal. So you cannot just kill, let's say, a big deer, an elephant,
and then fast 3 days. And
it's not going to be like that. Okay. So anyway, this verse cannot be relied upon to understand the haliyah, that it's halal for you to actually catch any type of fish and consume any type of fish. Why? Because this verse, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ صَيْدُ الْبَحْرِ, the verse is talking about people who are wearing ihram who are banned from hunting wild animal, but not banned, it's not forbidden for them to catch fishes.
Now, if you don't mind, we'll go straight into the ahadith that indicate the
You're not allowed, actually.
that you're not allowed to consume fish that do not have scales. Number one is a hadith, again narrated by Muhammad ibn Muslim from Imam Baqir alayhi salam this time, where he says, قُلْتُ لَهُ رَحِمَكَ اللَّهِ إِنَّا نُؤْتَى بِسَمَكٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ قِشْرٌ. He said, I asked Imam Baqir alayhi salam, I said, sometimes we are gifted fish that do not have scales. By the way, this is common practice in a lot of Gulf countries. I remember we used to get gifts like this as well, where people who lived along the shores would catch fish, and as gifts they'd give it to their loved ones. And so Muhammad ibn Muslim says that we are sometimes given fish that don't have scales. What do? And so Imam Baqir alayhi salam says, he says, كُلْ مَا لَهُ قِشْرٌ مِنَ السَّمَكِ. Eat the fish that have scales. And those who do not have scales, فَلَا تَأْكُلُهُ, then do not eat it. Another hadith.
Of course, this verse, it's not saying that
it's haram.
It's haram. So the Imam actually is not practicing the word of haram. He's saying, do not eat. Of course, do not avoid eating non-scaled fish. Sure. It doesn't actually necessarily shows that it's haram. But if we have only this verse, this narration, without any other narration indicating that probably it's halal for you to do that,
we would have said that it's haram.
We would have said that we're not allowed, okay? But if we have any other evidence that indicating it's halal, and that's why I saw some maraja and some scholars, when they come to this type of verse narration, they say we can actually combine between this type of narrations with the previous narrations that we just mentioned, because this verse is saying do not eat. It doesn't say it's haram. So do not eat. Of course, it can be makruh. It can be not only makruh, probably it's harmful. We don't know. Probably it's going to harm you because,
or it doesn't taste good for them.
It doesn't taste anything. It can be anything. I mean, it's not good for your health. For instance,
there are a multitude of reasons
to eat
why
shark.
You should avoid.
Do you want to have a shark behavior? You know, if you want to have a shark behavior, just eat shark. But you don't have to do that. Okay, just avoid eating shark.
And then another hadith, Hamad asks Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ, may I be ransom for you. الْحِيتَان مَا يُؤْكَلُ مِنْهَا, what types of fish can we eat? And so the Imam says, مَا كَانَ لَهُ قِشْرٌ, those that have scales. Again, the same thing that the Sayyid mentioned. The Imam doesn't explicitly say that eating fish without scales is haram. What he's saying is don't eat it, avoid it. And there are a number of reasons why that could be. Another hadith, Abdullah ibn Sinan asks Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Abdullah ibn Sinan narrates a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam where the Imam is talking about how Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, would act. And so he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen would ride the, what's a baghl say in English?
The
donkey.
It's not a donkey, it's honky.
Honky?
Because it's between horse and donkey.
Yeah, so an animal.
I don't know. They say the liger, the animal between tiger and a lion. Probably it's a honky.
Mule. That's
okay.
it. That's right. So the Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen was riding the mule of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he'd go into the market, and he would say to those who worked in the market, it was probably the fish market, the Imam would say, do not eat and do not sell the fish that do not have scales. فَيَقُولْ لَا تَأْكُلُوا وَلَا تَبِيعُوا مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ قِشْرٌ مِنَ السَّمَكِ. Again, the same thing that could be said about the two previous hadith can also be implemented here as well. Another hadith, Hanan ibn Sudayr asks Imam.
And that's very important because Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam used to be the governor, used to be the ruler and he was telling and ordering people not to eat and not to sell that. In other words, even if we say it's halal, it's not something that we have to do. It's not something that we have to run a barbecue, for instance,
for the entire family.
Yeah, for the entire family or the entire country or continent to just sell that. That's very important, because the ruler, Amir al-Mu'min alayhi salam, said that do not do that, and that's very important.
Yeah, so it shows that it's something that we shouldn't do, something that we should avoid at all costs, except for cases where, let's say, it extensively mentioned. Another hadith, Hannan ibn Sudayr narrates a hadith from Imam Sadiq, where the Imam says, مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ قِشْرٌ مِنَ السَّمَكِ فَلَا تَقْرَبْهُ. Any of the fish that do not have scales, then avoid them at all costs. Or avoid isn't doing justice to the word. فَلَا تَقْرَبْهُ means do not even get close to it. That goes to show that you should avoid it at all costs.
And that's why you're not allowed even to, we were asked not to even sell it. I mean, sell it, to not put it in Islamic shopping. That's the thing.
So even though it's halal, it's
halal
for other people.
Yeah, but
you shouldn't get too close.
Probably it's harmful. I'm not sure about that. Probably it's not that good for human beings to consume. But it's not haram. It's not like pork. That's the point of these narrations. Yeah.
Another hadith, Shaykh Saduq narrates a hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, where the Imam says, "Kul min as-samak ma lahu fulus." Eat of the fish that have scales, and do not eat those that do not have scales.
Yeah.
So before I allow Samahat Sayyid to make the conclusion, as you may have been able to understand, the hadith, it could be said, someone can come up and claim that, looking at the hadith, I have decided that fish that do not have scales are also halal. However,
the problem is, even scholars, I'm talking about those who come to this type of conclusion that it's halal in accordance to verses, or at least a verse that قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِيمَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَى طَاعِمٍ يَطْعَمُهُ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ مَيْتَةً أَوْ دَمًا مَسْفُوحًا أَوْ لَحْمَ خِنْزِيرٍ, and some other narrations. And when we go to those narrations that ban us from eating a scaled fish, we see that we can actually combine easily between these two type of evidence, because Imam alayhi salam is not saying that it's haram. He says that do not do it. So, of course, in those narrations he said it's halal, but in this narration he says do not do it. Okay. So we can come to a conclusion. Scholars went to that conclusion actually, and by saying that it's in accordance to evidence and proof, we believe it's halal. However, they won't deliver a verdict, as Samahat Mohammad Kadhim mentioned on that. Why? One of the reasons is this verse, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, and I want you to concentrate on that, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in Surah An-Nisa, I believe, verse number 115, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يشاقق الرسول من بعد ما تبين له الهدى ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين نوله ما تولى ونصله جهنم وساءت مصيرا. Whoever defies the apostle after the guidance has become clear to him and follows a way other than that of the faithful, okay, ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين نوله ما تولى. It's something very important. Since Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam came and guided us till now, Shia do not eat non-scaled fish without scale. Even if some people believe it's halal, they don't do it. So why should we go another way? scholars actually rely in such verse to prove that sometimes we have to be with the majority, we have to be with the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And as we know that those who do not follow Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they eat non-scaled or fishes without scales. But as for Shia, they don't do that, so we have to be with them. And that's why when they want to deliver the verdict, they say no. We cannot let Shia to eat fish without scale. Even though when we go to evidence, we might find it is permissible, but it doesn't necessarily mean, even if it's permissible, that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam wants us to do that. No, actually, it's the opposite. They want us to avoid eating non-scaled fish. And when we say non-scaled fish, we mean the other things as well. Probably some lobster. It's got some they got some sort of scales, but they're not considered fish. Only fish with scale, and prawn and what do you call it? The other name?
Prawn.
Only prawn and scaled fish we are allowed. Shrimp. Correct. Yeah, shrimp. We are allowed any type of prawn, whether it's tiger, lion, I don't know, dinosaur prawn. As long as it's a prawn, you are allowed to eat. Okay. Any type of scaled fish you are allowed to eat. It's too many type of them. Believe me, too many type of them. Very delicious ones. You don't have to go to sharks and lobsters. Yeah, and other things. So even though verses and narrations, we might be able to understand from them that it's not haram, but actually Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam didn't want their followers to eat any other type of fish but scaled fish and prawn or shrimp. And let me add one more thing, and actually about the fish. You know, it's not that very recommended to eat. Yeah.
Medically or religiously?
Religiously, I'm talking about. Medically, they say no, it's very good. It's got very good omega-3 and things like that. But when we go to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we see that they say it's not very recommended to eat fish. If you eat fish, have some date after that, because probably it's not. The fish, it shouldn't be our main diet. Yeah, probably it shouldn't be our main diet, and that's the thing. So that's a different story. I'm not talking about mustahabbat and makruhat. But generally talking about this topic, which is a little bit complicated, as you understand, I believe by now, we will say that, of course, we have to follow scholars. And scholars, when they come and say that we are not allowed to eat, they mean it. Why they mean it? Because they don't want to go against this verse. وَمَنْ يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. If all mu'mineen go in a way, we don't have to go in any other way. We have to follow mu'mineen. We have to be with them. We have to be with Ahlul Bayt. When Ahlul Bayt states that do not eat anything but scaled fish, we have to follow them, even though if it's halal for us to eat non-scaled fish. Let's take some questions and see how we goes after that. Of course, I know we discussed too many verses today, too many narrations, too many point of views. Wasn't that easy for you to comprehend, but probably should be useful. Listen, this joint with Samah Sayyid Muhammad.
While Sayyidina, you're looking at the questions, I'd like to thank Samah Sayyid for these important points. And I think what the Sayyid finally mentioned is really quite important. To know that something is halal doesn't mean that you should definitely practice it. There are a number of examples that I can think of. I'll try to avoid them because I don't want to have people think that things that they may have thought are haram and have avoided are in fact halal. But I'm just saying that you should, in general, with regards to things that the hadith have said you should stay away. And it's for your own good that you avoid and stay away from.
So, first question, salamun alaikum, it's not a question, alaikum salam. The second one is it okay to be vegetarian? It's okay, but it's not very recommended. And actually we have narration saying
at least once every 40 days.
Once every 40 days. And it's recommended to have meat every week at least. Yeah, mustahab. Once, yeah, it's mustahab. I've seen some narrations.
Is it only sheep meat, right? So lamb is recommended.
Lamb is recommended.
Cow is, I think, makruh.
It's not that recommended, yeah. Although it's sometimes more delicious. When you have the what do you call it?
Steak.
No, that's steak. The shawarma. Yeah, shawarma. The
beef shawarma.
Beef shawarma,
always,
it's the best.
Always wins.
Yeah. But it's not that recommended. Although I've seen some. Actually, there were Alibaba shop in Australia. They used to serve lamb shawarma with the taste of beef. It was excellent. But I told someone, he said, no, they are cheating. Yeah. Okay. So, Sister Florence, Sayyidah Florence, we went to a restaurant with a scholar once, and I remember he refused to eat shrimp. I thought shrimp was halal. It is halal, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's halal. He probably didn't like it. Do you like shrimp?
A little bit.
Yeah,
not so much.
But because some people, I've seen some people, they don't eat any type of fish or any type of sea creatures, shrimps, and any other thing. So of course they're not very fan of sushi.
Yes.
So no, it's halal. It's halal to eat shrimp. Sister Zaina, may Allah bless you as well. Give you a long, blissful life. Keep you protected and grant you. This is another question. Thank you. Okay.
You're very kind.
It is true that we are not encouraged to reject gifts. Yes. Yeah, but if someone gives you a wine as a gift, of course you have to reject it. But generally speaking, yes, it is actually recommended. Actually, it's makruh probably to reject because it's not that nice. And actually, we have narration. Yeah, when the Prophet actually said that when you travel, you can pray your salat, you can qasr, so from 4 to 2 rak'ah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states فَلَا جُنَاحَ. It's okay. It's okay to pray qasr, okay? But it was a gift. I've seen a narration indicating that it was a gift from Allah. And rejecting the gift is not nice. Especially the gift of Allah. And that's why it's haram for you to
pray full salat.
Pray full salat. So yes, sometimes, for instance, your father give you a gift. No, I don't want it. Why? Are you so arrogant to not accept a gift from your father? Sometimes, you have to submit. Of course, sometimes if you receive a gift from, for instance, from someone, you might feel humiliated. I don't know why. But if that person is someone that you should respect, such as your father, your mother, your wife, sometimes, okay, you have to accept it, and it's very nice to accept it, and it's makruh to reject it actually. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Are shrimps prawn makruh? No, it's not. They are not makruh. What about crab? Crab is haram actually. We are not allowed. Let's use this terminology. We are not allowed to consume that.
So it falls in the same category as fish that do not have, or sea creatures that don't have scales.
You can take the long questions.
One second. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid. I hope both of you are well. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. I had the following questions. Okay, so this is 3 questions packed into one. And if the Sayyid doesn't mind, we'll conclude with this question. Are you okay? Should we read a little bit more?
No, we can read. We have some times as well.
Okay. How often can we eat halal meat? I like white meat, which I guess means chicken, and sometimes I tend to eat more. Is that okay? Is it okay to eat meat?
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with eating meat. I think there's a hadith that also says that you shouldn't eat.
I mean, chickens are not.
In general, are not recommended.
Yeah, because it's actually called khinzir al-tuyur, the swine of birds. But probably not these chickens, because they put them in cages. They can't eat but their food, and it's been mentioned that why they are considered as
They
swine,
eat all types
because
of
they eat everything. Okay, and we have we have an idiom in Persian. They say if you give a chilo kebab to a chicken, it will rub that chilo kebab into dust and then eat it. So it's not very recommended to eat chicken, but if you want to do so, yeah, you can eat as much as you want.
Unfortunately, chickens aren't very.
Especially if you invite us.
They'll eat garbage. Oh yeah, sure. You can also invite us. He's anonymous, by the way. He's chosen to be anonymous.
Yeah, probably for that.
Because he doesn't want to invite us.
Yeah, okay, that's
probably. No, this is just a joke. So yeah, you could eat chicken, it's fine, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, say, correct me, that it's makruh to eat meat 40 days consecutively.
Yeah, correct. And actually, I'm not sure whether it's riwayah or not. It's recommended to do adhan in his right.
Of the chicken? Oh,
if someone eats meat for 40 consecutive days, adhan in his right ear and iqama in his left ear, probably. It's not that good, I mean, to eat meat every day, but it's not good as well to be a vegetarian, you know?
The second question is, some people shift to vegan diet when living abroad in a country where halal meat is not easily available. Is that allowed and all right to do? Yes, but as the Sayyid mentioned, if you can get your hands on some halal meat, then make sure that you do that at least once every 40 days. According to a hadith, of course. Number 3, some restaurants offer fish dishes where there is no scale and we don't know whether the fish was scaled one or non-scaled. Then is it okay to eat?
No, we have to be sure. Especially when you go travel by, airplane, sometimes you ask for seafood. So you see the salad with the octopus, the octopus,
tentacles,
moving. And what about the fish? You don't know. If you have to be 100% sure that, can you go to McDonald's and have a fish sandwich? No. You have to ask them whether they use the scaled fish or not. So you have to be sure.
Filet-O-fish, for those who are wondering what the sandwich is called.
Yeah.
McDonald's Filet-O-fish. A person is considered in ihram when he crosses any of the miqat. I don't think there is any water body in the haram area of Mecca. So why this ayah?
You can do nether as well for the ihram.
Before you get to the miqat, either that where you wear the ihram through making a vow before you get to the miqat, or it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. It could just be fish farm. You could have a fish farm around, so in the city of Mecca. That's scientifically there's no issue with having a fish farm. There are numerous fish farms here in Qom, although the atmosphere of Qom is very similar to that of Mecca.
Very similar to Texas, probably. It's not like it's not like California, I believe.
Yeah, where you have beaches and oceans.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, dear Sada, wa alaikum salam, brother Hussein, Abu Ali. May Allah bless you. Thank you so much. Allah yahfadhak, inshallah. How long do such discussions and extrapolations of ahkam regarding seafood take for the fuqaha? Yani, how long does it take for you to make get out with an answer when looking?
It depends. I mean, sometimes such ahkam are very complicated that scholars not only look at evidence, but they as well they do tawassul to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to Imam al-Zaman alayhi salam. As probably you know, some of Muqaddas al-Ardabil is a story that he used to do tawassul to Imam al-Zaman. As well, Mirza Shirazi used to do tawassul. And I've heard from one of my teachers who is related to Ayatollah Sistani. He said Sayyid Sistani, when he wanted to deliver a verdict to protect Iraq from Daesh, he made a tawassul to Imam al-Zaman to show him the right path. So whether we should defend or whether we should sit down and look what will happen, it depends. We don't know. Sometimes it depends on that topic, how sensitive it is. It depends on the evidence. And sometimes you see that by the end of the day, they say, no, we cannot say anything. We cannot give you the permission. We cannot say it's haram. That's why we say it's ihtiyat wajib to avoid. When they say it's ihtiyat wajib to avoid, it means that they don't have any verdict on that. But they don't give you the permission to do. Okay? And that's the other thing. Yeah. So it depends.
And also, again, correct me, Sayyidina, if I'm wrong, in some areas of fiqh, you'd notice that a ruling depends on a single hadith. But then when you get to other issues, you notice that there are 50 ahadith issued in regards to a single issue. So it also depends on the number of ahadith and the extentiveness of the evidences.
Okay, so take one more question because it's 8 o'clock almost, and you have to get class.
Yes.
Okay, so you just from Sister Rafat.
Yes.
That's not it. Just take that question.
Assalamu alaikum to you both. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. It's nice to see you together. Thank you so much. You're very kind. I was wondering, at what point and to what extent can we use the intellect to derive a conclusion, such as through the methodology you presented? Because I feel that we are not able to use our tainted intellect. I'll leave this question to the Sayyid. It's his field of expertise.
Intellect, sometimes, I mean, scholars use intellect to actually not only comprehend verses and narrations, but sometimes to rely upon to understand the hukum. For instance, I believe some fuqaha believe that if you pray in a house, that this house is not yours. And after, let's say, 10 years, you found, let's say it's yours, apparently. But then you realize that the keeper of the house, or the one who sold, the seller that sold the house to you, wasn't him. And he sold it to you. And you prayed there for 10 years. He usurped
it from someone else.
Yeah. That's the problem. Some scholars say, as long as that you didn't know that, the real owner, and you didn't have the intention to do ghasab, to actually invade that house, to pray in that house without seeking the permission of the owner, your salat is valid. But some other scholars believe that no, in accordance to intellect, no, it's void, it's invalid. You have to repeat all those prayers. And they say that. Why? Because they say that intellect drive us to believe that we are not allowed to use other people's property without their permissions, and we didn't have the permission. That's it. We're stuck with that. Of course, we're not going to be punished, but we have to redo our prayers. So yes, sometimes they use intellect, but anyway, it's complicated. So we thank all of you for your attendance. We enjoyed being with you, and I thank Samahat Sayyid Mohammad Kadhim.
Thank you. You graced us with your presence. It was a great blessing to have you on.
And probably we take a little bit longer than we expected. So it's 1 hour and
almost 15 minutes.
Yeah, almost 10, 11 minutes. So thank you.